ministry officials and delegations from various South African countries, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asked to speak on e-learning, and the organisers were very, very quick to say to me, please keep it 15 minutes. But what they didn't tell me was that the salutation was 5 minutes on its own, so I hope I get a little bit of extra time to end my presentation. There is one disadvantage of speaking at the last, just before lunch, and not just the obvious that everyone is thinking of what's outside there rather than what's on the board. It's because everybody has already covered most of what I wish to say. And I think my view on e-learning in my presentation we're just going to be an overview, holistic overview of what we found to work and what succeeded or what hasn't succeeded. And you'll notice a lot of these points are repeated from several speakers already. Just to outline briefly the structure of what I will talk about. Just briefly, technology and education, go through some of the literatures because I think it is still a controversial issue. Rationale for concern, and why do we do ICTs in education? Is it a foregone conclusion? I would like to just debate that. Effective learning, and then conclusions. Technology and education. There have always been skeptics for technology and education. Socrates, in the early days, believed that the spoken word would cause a downfall of the written word, and that to write words down would actually destroy the man's intellect. The printed press that was developed in the 15th century, scholars thought would be the downfall of the then education institutions, as they thought at the time. And there are many, many skeptics to ICT in education, and I'll cover a few of those in a little while. But on the other hand, there have been the zealots and the people that are so keen to push technology. In 1922, Thomas Edison predicted that the motion picture is destined to replace the education system. In a few years, it will largely supplant, if not entirely, the use of textbooks. In 1945, William Levinson, the director of the Cleveland Public Radio, said that there will become a time when the portable radio will be as common in the classroom as a blackboard and may even replace it. Early in the 1960s, B.F. Skinner talked about the teaching machine. This really was the first start of what we call e-learning today, with the very early computers. And he predicted that these teaching machines would allow students to learn twice as much in the same amount of time, and probably without teachers. None of this really happened, certainly not to the extent that the people thought about. If we have a look through literature and have a look at some of the success stories, I know it's not a good idea always to look at developed countries, but I think we can have a look, an objective look at the literature and try and see how it applies to us as a developing economies. Apple in the 1980s were probably one of the first to look at the education market. And Steve Jobs, later in about 1996, in an interview he was doing with Wired magazine, said that what is wrong with the US education system is not going to be fixed by technology. In a BBC article more recently in 2005 that was entitled Doubts About Computer Use, it seemed to indicate that learners who had a great deal of access to ICTs did not seem to improve their results at all. In a similar research done by Thomas Fuchs in Germany in 2005, he showed that the performance had a sort of an inverted U-shape, that while some access did provide some benefit, over-access tended to be detrimental. Professor Cuban at Stanford University indicated that classroom size was a key. If you had small classroom size of, say, below 15, it was effective. A normal class size of 30 became ineffective to use the ICTs. In 2009, the US Education Department system in a review indicated that there was insufficient evidence, scientific evidence, to show of the effectiveness of e-learning or open classroom. Ben Levin, who was then the Deputy Director of the Ministry of Education in Ontario, Canada, said in an interview that they had used, in their research of many different types of ICTs, PCs, laptops, whiteboards, in their education systems, and they had shown that the children who had access to ICTs were no further advanced than children that didn't have access to ICTs. And in a very recent article published in September of last year, the New York Times talked about stagnant schools in classrooms of the future. And they indicated that while US education systems are spending huge amounts of income on ICT technology, while they're cutting the budgets in the arts, they're cutting budgets in the library and laying off teachers, there's no significant proof that this approach is actually improving the learning environment. So although there have been some undisputed areas of literature of success, and these include learning challenge, attention deficit disorder, learning disabled, or hearing disadvantaged children, it can be seen without any much work to look into literature that there are some serious issues with regards of ICTs in education. And there have always been, throughout history, people that are adverse to technology in education. I think it would be very easy to just classify this as just another one of those battles of ICT in education. It's just another chapter in the world's older story of humanity, just not wanting to change. But I believe that does an injustice to actually what is happening here. So there are much bigger forces at work in this new revolution. ICTs and internet evolution challenges our social norms to the absolute core. We have probably, with no other technology before, had to look at the change in our personal priorities. The danger of overemphasis of ICTs, I think, is quite real, and we should be cognizant of it. The danger of overemphasis of ICTs could result in the real and the physical being downplayed over the unreal or the virtual world. We could result in having more emphasis put on 2D screen objects than on real touch and feel objects, or a real conversation with a teacher or a parent or another student. So the process could result in finally limiting the child's imagination and stifling creativity. So there are a lot of issues, I believe, with ICT in education. Why then do we look at ICT in education? Why in fact then do we even have the summit? And I think it's been summarized with many of the speakers before. I think we all assume and we all recognize that ICTs are a principal driver for economic development and social reforms. And that's especially true, obviously, in economic countries. Do we then just ignore these issues that have been raised in literature and just continue with our own agendas? I don't believe so. But I do believe that there is a fundamental problem with the history and research that has been done. That successful education is being measured on old and evaluated on old techniques and old pedagogies that are no longer applicable to current technology. In addition, I think while there are advantages and disadvantages of one PC per laptop per child, the effectiveness of overusage are still being debated elsewhere in the world. As an emerging economy, the budget restrictions are much greater and the access to technology for our schools is much more limited. So we are yet to get to those sort of limits. So while I believe it's important to be aware of the potential dangers, I believe that we have to urgently embark on a process for establishing the best practices for e-learning or ICT in education. A large part of the summit looks at new technology and ICT equipment. But ICT equipment only plays one part in the whole role of effective e-learning solution. Very often the supply of ICT equipment tends to be the main focus of any sort of implementation. For a successful e-learning implementation, I believe that there needs to be a number of conditions that have to be considered. And these are by no means exhaustive, but I just want to list a few and hopefully they will be food for thought and debate. Primary on my list is a shared vision, and I think this has been outlined by a number of speakers. A proactive leadership is required to develop a shared vision for educational technology or e-learning amongst all stakeholders. Without a vision, implementations are typically uncoordinated, piecemeal, and very often they are donor-driven rather than vision-driven. The vision needs to lead to policies, and I'm not just referring to ICT policies for the nation, I'm talking about specific ICT and education policies that need to be developed. And these need to be rolled down national, regional, and to the local levels to support schools and to support the teachers in new programs. To realize the full potential, these policies should be coordinated with other ministries and other areas like telecommunications, economic development, human resources, urban and regional, rural planning. And these policies should be directly linked to the desired national goals on economic and social development. A national cross-ministry ICT coordinating agency should utilize the external resources as well. It should be set up as a my slideshow seems to be faster than me today. A national cross-ministerial ICT coordinating agency committee should be established that utilizes not only ministerial support but also external resources, universities, schools. And as in the case, as Singapore's done a good job, Namibia, I think Rwanda we've seen earlier, have done a great job in this. And the policies need to be renewed. They should be specific and very detailed, and they should also be very short term. I mean, we saw in Rwanda's presentation that they're 5-year policies. Singapore's done the same thing. They've done 3 5-year policies for ICT in education, but they're very specific and very detailed. It's no doubt that schools of the future will be very different to the schools that we know of today. And I think we've covered this point many times and the words come up, 21st century skills and 21st century pedagogy. And I think this is vital. We need to drastically revitalize the way we think and the way we teach. For over 150 years now, we've used a set of pedagogies that reflect the priorities of an industrial age. In the process of mass schooling, the hallmarks of this pedagogy are found in teacher-controlled learning, where students are presented with information for attention and recall to same-age students in a classroom setting. We need to critically examine and review our teaching pedagogy to accurately incorporate modern trends and desired outcomes to equip our students effectively for the 21st century. The trick is not just to add ICTs to existing methods. As shown from the literature, this normally does not lead to any difference at all. But it's to use ICT to meet new goals that better reflect the needs of a knowledge-based society with a new set of outcomes. Some of these outcomes could include creativity and innovation, communication and collaboration, research, information and fluency rather than information retention, critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, awareness that we are part of a global village, as well as just basic technology of operations and ICT concepts. This is critical to any successful e-learning implementation. Foundational skills. Training needs to start at appropriate levels for teachers, for pupils, to build their skills gradually in a piecemeal manner. Ensuring that we have foundational skills that are taught and not assumed has proved to be a very common oversight in program failures, especially in the developing countries. Curriculum framework. We need to identify local and relevant content standards and related digital curriculum resources that are aligned and support with e-learning. This needs to be based on student-centered learning and incorporate planning, teaching methods and assessment criteria. There are a number of these commercial packages that are available, and the one that ICTE Africa has found to be quite effective is eLearner, which is represented here. And just to clarify, to confirm that eLearner is a program as opposed to our TAS company, which is eLearning Solutions. Contingency planning. I think we all know the failures of ICT. Teachers and support staff have to be prepared for disruptions in e-learning due to internal system failures as well as external system failures and limitations. These should be included with the curriculums and included in the planning and training of the teachers so that they are prepared when there is a disruption. Skilled personnel, educators and support staff and other leaders need to be skilled in the selection and effective use of appropriate ICT resources. This is not a once-off, but should be an ongoing professional development. It is, no matter how much IT money, how much money is spent in IT, without teachers, willing teachers supporting you, the project will have no effect. Suitable equipment. I think there's always a requirement for access to current, intuitive, robust, and sustainable technologies for digital resources. And this requires ongoing funding and support. A large number of us are here for the glitz and the glamour of new technology. Tablets are definitely one of the future technologies for education this year. The Indian government has launched an initiative for tertiary students, offering them an Akashi tablet at $35 per unit. At the end of last year, Russian Federal Institute of Development of Education has launched an initiative to give an e-reader to every single child in the Russian education system, and they've launched a few pilots. We at NUST are working on a few projects with different e-readers, some basic e-readers below the $80 mark, some more sophisticated e-readers or tablets that not only will have contain 13 years of textbooks, in all the textbooks a child would need, but as well can access the internet, can surf, can email, can send documents, can do assessments and is solar charged, and is all around the $150 mark. That's about 10 textbooks. Technical support. Reliable and accessible maintenance is required for using ICT and digital resources. The teachers need all their time to actually teach and shouldn't be expected to support IT. If you're expecting teachers to support IT, the learning program is probably going to fail. As has been touched on before, assessment and evaluation. If there's no revision in the assessment and evaluation methods to match new 21st century skills, success of e-learning cannot be measured. This should take the form of some sort of based on desired outcomes, and should take the form of continuous assessment. There are many different types, and I think the ICDL, which has been represented here, ICDL Africa, have proved to be an excellent benchmark for just the basic fundamental standards or skills for assessing students. So in conclusion, and I'm caught up with my slides, e-learning has been around for quite some time. For a developing country, it's a program that can not only meet the social and economic agendas, but it also levels the past inadequacies and opens up global learning opportunities that will allow us to effectively equip our graduates with skills to meet the 21st century requirements. We need more than just ICT equipment and programs for a successful e-learning solution. We need a national vision and policy across ministries to align to social and economic agendas. We need to review our education pedagogy with new targets and new measurable deliverables. We need to take gradual steps to ensure that the skills for teachers and students are taught and assist teachers with their lessons and contingency planning. It needs to be an ongoing commitment and not a once-off, both for developing skills and for funding of equipment. There needs to be an appropriate choice of suitable, reliable, and intuitive hardware and supporting software. There needs to be strong and easily accessible support, technical support for the schools and teachers. Socrates was wrong. Written word will not kill our intellect. We need to be open to new technology in education. However, the printing press, the radio, the TV never eliminated teachers, but they all contributed to enhance teaching methods and also affected the way we as a social society interact today. E-learning will, too, never replace the spoken word or the written word. Neither will it replace teachers, but it will significantly affect the way we can teach, probably more than any other technology before. It will and has already drastically affected the way we as humans interact, explore, and learn. Thank you.